Hello, and welcome to the Whale Hunting Podcast, where we shine a light onto the hidden worlds of money and power. This week, we have a very special guest, Gareth Gore, journalist here in London at the IFR and author of a new book, Opus, about the secretive Catholic organization Opus Dei, their use of hundreds of millions of dollars around the world to influence their global agenda. This is a super fascinating investigation and a cinematic narrative. So enjoy. Welcome, Gareth.
Thanks for having me, Bradley.
So you're the author of a new book, Opus, coming out in October. It's sort of like Da Vinci Code meets Billion Dollar Whale. Maybe you could just introduce us to the idea of what it is.
Yes, so the book is basically an expose of Opus Dei, which is a kind of a wing of the Catholic Church that was made famous with the Da Vinci Code. But what the book does is kind of delve into the organization's kind of hidden finances and also exposes a lot of the kind of abuse and manipulation that goes on within its ranks. So yeah, that's how I'd sum it up.
Excellent. Well, let's get back into the subject in a minute, but just to start off with, could you just tell me a little bit about yourself? Obviously, I know you're a journalist here in London for the IFR. How did you kind of end up investigating this world? Like, how did your career bring you into Opus Dei?
Well, I never planned to write anything about Opus Dei. I came into this story completely by accident. As you said, so I've been a journalist for like more than 20 years. I've worked for Bloomberg in the past. I've written stuff for Reuters. I'm currently at IFR. I've been there for many years. And basically in 2017, a bank in Spain collapsed, which isn't all that unusual here in Europe, especially in the last kind of 15 years or so since the crisis. And I was asked to write about it. And at first, the story just seemed like every other bank collapse. You know, like the managers had taken too many risks and hadn't stayed on top of things, and things had just kind of blown up. But the more I dug into the story, the kind of less sense it seemed to make. And eventually I had a few breakthroughs, which led me through all the way to Opus Dei and its tentacles all around the world.
I love this kind of a project because it reminds me, or it emphasizes the idea that business journalists are often the best equipped to do investigative journalism, because if you walk around with a business card that says IFR on it, people are not running for the hills, freaking out. Oh, who is this guy coming? You know, so it's great camouflage to really investigate things.
Totally, and I think, and I'm sure you discovered this with your projects as well, that I think having the confidence to like dig through kind of complex financial material and like go through financial reports, there's a wealth of information kind of hidden in those reports, and I think a lot of generalists almost are a bit put off by that, or maybe don't have the confidence to kind of put the pieces together. So I think being a business journalist has really helped me out a lot with the story.
Yeah, exactly. And the best thing about being a business journalist is realizing that all of the complexity, the jargon is meant to throw you off.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of that. Just ask questions and figure it out.
Yeah.
So let's just start with Opus Dei. You know, what exactly is Opus Dei? Is it kind of like the Church of Scientology part of Catholicism, or how do you get your arms around Opus Dei?
Okay, I'd say there's a public side to Opus Dei and there's a private side to Opus Dei. So publicly, Opus Dei is it's an official part of the Catholic Church. It's an organization that it says it's an organization that wants to help ordinary people to live out their Catholic faith more seriously in their everyday lives. It's got 100,000 members around the world. And not only is it kind of recognized by the Catholic Church, but its founder, this Spanish priest called José María Escrivá, he's actually a saint in the Catholic Church. He was canonized in 2002. He's considered the kind of saint of everyday life. So that's the kind of public side. But there's a kind of hidden underbelly to the movement as well. So basically, I think at the core of this there's 10% of its members are what they call numeri members. So these are people that have dedicated their lives to Opus Dei. They've taken these vows of chastity and poverty and obedience. And they're basically people who are at the beck and call of the organization. The organization abuses and manipulates these people, and it uses them to control the remaining 90% of the members. So the remaining 90% of members are just ordinary Catholics who have they're doctors and teachers and lawyers or whatever. They live in their homes and they have kids. And so what the organization does is it uses these numeri members to collect information on the supernumeraries about how much money they have, about how they're politically connected, who their friends are, with a view to kind of, achieving the bigger aims, the bigger mission of Opus Dei, which is the re-Christianization of society. So it's the public-facing thing. We're just helping ordinary Catholics to be more serious. This hidden underbelly of control and manipulation to further its own aims.
And the people that run Opus Dei, they have this mission, what you described as re-Christianizing society, but what are the means in which they're achieving that? And I mean, it seems obvious that having access to money is a step towards power and influence. So what are some of the things that Opus Dei are using their money for, and how much money do they have?
Okay, there's quite a lot of questions there. Let's kind of start with how they kind of go about it, and then we can move on to the money, if you like, a little bit later. So ever since the very beginnings of Opus Dei, the founder of Opus Dei had this vision, and he decided, or he kind of came to the conclusion that in order to influence society, you had to go after the elite. So right from the beginning, from the 1930s, 1940s, what he did and what his kind of closest ring of followers did was go after people who were in a position of power, or people who were on their way to positions of power. So they would target like the top students at the elite universities in Spain, and they still do that all around the world these days as well. They would target kind of government bureaucrats, business people, because through these people, by manipulating the way that these people think, that's the way that the organization is able to kind of push through the kind of changes it wants to see in the world. And to come back to what you were saying about the kind of the material way that it might do this. So like Opus Dei officially owns nothing but its headquarters and a couple of other properties in Rome. And kind of, so legally speaking, that might well be very true. But in reality, it's a complete fiction. I'm sure you've come across similar kind of things in your various investigations as well over the years. So kind of Opus Dei over the years, over the decades, has very kind of methodically and systematically constructed this huge web of companies and non-profits all over the world that officially have nothing at all to do with it, but which in practice are completely controlled by the organization. So, I've spoken to people who've been appointed to run these various companies. And, there's this one guy in Spain who was a director of various Opus Dei initiatives. Well, officially not Opus Dei initiatives, but they were. And, he would be asked to sign minutes of meetings that he'd supposedly attended, to confirm like decisions that he'd supposedly made and this was the first he'd seen about it. So basically the kind of regional headquarters in Spain and in all of these other countries are kind of issuing diktats and telling these companies, these non-profits, what to do. And there are all these kind of straw men, generally men, but there's some women too, who are basically the fall guys for all of this. I mean, I'm sure you've seen similar operations with various things.
And then, so what are these nonprofits doing to further the cause? Are they holding events, or what exactly are they doing? Well,
they kind of fall into various camps. I mean, some of them set up kind of initiatives for children. Officially speaking, these are just places where, girls might learn, do cookery classes. Generally, it's kind of segregated by gender, because it would be, they don't like the sexes to mix. So they might offer cookery classes for girls, or they might offer like homework clubs for boys. But these are all run by numeri members, and the whole time they're watching the kids and they're taking notes on the kids. And there was this case in Australia where this young boy, who was like 13, 14, was invited to this homework club run by Opus Dei numeries, and he discovered this kind of stash of notes that had been kept on all the kids about how likely they were to perhaps become members themselves of Opus Dei, and noting the flaws and the weaknesses and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, they've got educational initiatives. They run universities. They also, some of the more fringe parts of this kind of network also kind of delve into the world of politics as well. I mean, there's all kinds of initiatives, especially in the US and in Spain as well, where it's quite clear Opus Dei is trying to influence policy and kind of get its teeth really quite deep into the education system as well.
And I mean, that kind of goes to the sort of Da Vinci Code caricature of the group, right? But how much of that is influenced by the truth, do you think? This idea of this kind of powerful, elite, secretive society trying to control the future of the world sort of thing?
The Da Vinci Code was a kind of a caricature of Opus Dei, but caricatures are kind of distortions of the truth. There is a kernel of truth in there that this is absolutely a secretive organization that controls and manipulates its members in order to further its own political goals. So I think, while some of the details of Da Vinci Code of this, the albino monk who was kind of out there murdering people to protect this secret at the heart of the Catholic Church, of course, that's complete fiction. But there are elements to the story that completely chime with reality as well.
Within Catholicism and within the Vatican, how do people look at Opus Dei?
I think the Catholic Church is deeply divided in itself, right? There are, I think, the more conservative elements within the church see Opus Dei as this bastion of conservatism and something that they very strongly support. I mean, most Catholics many members of Opus Dei itself as well are completely unaware about what's happening within the organization and how it operates and the kind of abuse and control that's taking place within its ranks. So I think, a lot of the Catholic Church, a lot of the conservative wing of the Catholic Church is quite supportive of Opus Dei and quite defensive whenever anything kind of emerges that kind of sheds and casts a negative light on Opus Dei. But there's also, there's a liberal part of the church and a more kind of, I guess, the kind of middle ground as well. There's an awareness. I've spoken to cardinals and bishops who are extremely aware about this kind of dark force within the church. And there are many within the church, many very senior people within the church, going all the way up to the top, who would be keen to shut Opus Dei down or to stage an intervention to stop all of this abuse from happening. It was really kind of enlightening for me. I was in Rome last year. I spent a few days there and met with some really quite senior people. I was shocked to discover just how the kind of size of the opposition to Opus Dei within the Catholic Church. And there's currently there's a huge battle going on within the church. So Pope Francis is very aware of the abuses that have taken place in Opus Dei over the years. He's sought to kind of clamp down on the organization. He's changed the rules around that kind of govern how Opus Dei operates within the church. And at the moment, there's this huge standoff. So he's basically ordered them to you need to rip up all of your rules and you need to kind of basically draw up some new statutes, which I will approve as Pope. And there's been this huge standoff for about 18 months. Opus Dei has presented a few modifications. The Pope said, no way, that doesn't go far enough. But it's kind of interesting that the Pope, the most senior person in the church, seems unable to really just go straight after them. He's kind of dancing this very delicate dance. He doesn't want to piss off too many people because he knows that there's this huge conservative wing of the church that kind of supports Opus Dei. So he's trying not to create this huge schism. But at the same time, he's very aware that something needs to be done and that there's a very serious problem here that he's trying to tackle, albeit very slowly. I mean, the risk here is that he dies right before the reforms he wants to see are pushed through, and that the next pope is conservative and allows them to continue operating as they have.
And sorry to keep asking so many basic questions about Opus Dei, but, is it quite public that you're a member of Opus Dei, or is it often kept secret? And do you have is there some way to wink at somebody to say, I'm also an Opus Dei? I mean, it feels like it's sort of not fully above ground, the whole organization.
Well, okay. I mean, like,
You can show me the wink now if you want. Yeah.
well, there is actually Opus Dei members. When two Opus Dei members know that they're both members, they basically greet each other in a very, in the very same way, wherever you might be, anywhere in the world. So one person says "pax," which is Latin for peace, and the other person responds "in eternum," for eternity. So this is the way that Opus Dei members. It seems almost like something you would see in a film or whatever, but this is absolutely true. This is the way that Opus Dei members, when two people know them, both members, this is the way they greet each other all around the world. But to answer your question about whether it's public or not, no, absolutely, it's not public. And part of me kind of respects that. You know, these are people's private lives. If they choose to be part of this kind of organization, that's something that they should be allowed to do or whatever. But I think that there's another kind of element to this. I mean, I think Opus Dei plays with the fact that it plays with this fact to hide its membership, basically. And what's very interesting as well is that you go to any Opus Dei initiative around the world, and there's nothing outside on the door that says, you know, this is an Opus Dei initiative or whatever. Everything's completely hidden.
So they don't have like a tattoo like in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the Brotherhood of the Cruciform Sword. You know, you like pull their shirt over and you can find the mark.
I haven't pulled anyone's shirt off during the investigation,
okay.
So maybe. But,
so basically, you didn't go all the way.
I didn't. Okay. I didn't go all the way.
I want to make sure.
But no, there isn't. There isn't some tattoo that they wear now.
So let's get back into how you first entered the story, which is this bank, Banco Popular, and also the kind of scandal that happened with Banco Popular.
Yes, I mean, as I was saying before, I mean, I came into this story completely by accident. So this bank had collapsed. I was sent to report on it, and I started digging. You know, basically, my employer IFR gave me a lot of kind of leeway to just kind of do my own thing and dig around, and that's how this whole story started. And many elements of the story just didn't make any sense. For one, most of the shareholders and bondholders who had lost money in the collapse, they decided they wanted to sue. Apart from one shareholder, which was the biggest shareholder of all, this kind of collection of entities that called themselves the syndicate. And I was like, what the hell is the syndicate? It doesn't make any sense. And as I kind of dug more, I found out that a lot of the companies that formed the syndicate were all kind of registered at the same address. And they all had this kind of seemingly interchangeable team of men kind of who were looking after them. And I was like, that's kind of a bit odd. And dug a bit further. And each of these companies seemed to have links to like Opus Dei projects around the world. And I was like, again, that's kind of odd. And I got this real breakthrough. I basically started doing a bit of digging around into the history of the bank and found out that for many years it had been run by these two brothers, one of whom was a member of Opus Dei. Again, like, just a minute, this just keeps coming up, like, there's something here. So he died, like, in 2006, but his brother was still alive. His brother was not a member of Opus Dei, and I managed to convince him to talk. And, basically I went to meet him, first of all, in Madrid. Here's this guy who's approaching 90. He's kind of in poor health. I think he'd just been given this diagnosis of some kind of rare blood disorder. He knew he didn't have a huge amount of time left. And he basically just decided to spill the beans about this bank that he'd worked at for decades and he'd run with his brother for many years. And he basically told me, look, the syndicate, it's just a front for Opus Dei. And he was basically, this is how it all worked. And he kind of walked me through it. So the remnants of Banco Popular were bought by another Spanish bank, Santander. And, along with all of the branches and whatever, they also acquired the archives. They didn't know what was in the archives. And when I came along and requested, like, look, I'm investigating this story about Banco Popular and the former chairman, can I come into the archives? And they were like, sure, yeah, why not? You're a business journalist. We know you. Like, yeah, why wouldn't we let you in? They didn't know, of course, what was in there. So with the testimony of this, one of the brothers and access to the archives, that was basically the start of a much bigger investigation. And very soon I was kind of finding huge flows of money going from the bank to all over the world. We're talking kind of hundreds of millions of dollars over the course of many years. And in particular, one kind of flow of money that caught my attention was to Argentina, because whilst I was in the middle of investigating all of this big story came out in the Associated Press about these women in Argentina who alleged that they'd been basically kind of coerced into joining Opus Dei and enslaved and forced to work for no pay, 14 hours a day, kind of scrubbing the toilets and cooking meals for the elite members of Opus Dei. And they decided to go public and to sue. So this story came out, and at first I was like, well, that's kind of, that's obviously terrible. And like, I really feel for this woman, but surely that's got nothing to do with all of this. And then one day I found this document in the archives that made clear how money from the bank had been used to fund basically the recruitment center where many of these women have been recruited. And so, so then I just kept on digging. And I kind of keep joking with whenever someone asks me about the book, but basically every stone you pick up, there's a whole kind of Opus Dei ecosystem underneath. And it's, if I'd had another 10 years to keep reporting, I'm sure I would have unearthed all kinds of other stuff. But you have to stop somewhere.
I'm sure it's gonna be hard to quit this particular story. But so with the bank, was Opus Dei doing anything illegal, or was it mismanaged, or what exactly? Could you explain that part?
Okay, so I'm not a lawyer, and I'm certainly not an expert in Spanish law. So whether or not it was doing something illegal, I will leave that for the lawyers to fight out. But certainly, there was certainly an amount of kind of mismanagement going on. There were pretty sizable decisions being taken that in many cases directly benefited Opus Dei or Opus Dei linked companies and foundations. It was pretty clear to me that, all of the information wasn't presented to board members, or maybe decisions were taken without consultation with other board members. So I think there's certainly a case to be heard for certain members of Opus Dei abusing their positions within the banks to siphon off money. Whether or not any of that was illegal, these are very sophisticated, clever people, many of whom have backgrounds in law. So I'm sure they tried as hard as they could to ensure that everything was above the law. But while it was kind of above the law, whether it was actually kind of in keeping with the spirit of the law, I'm not so sure.
And some of the movements of these flows of money, are we talking about loans being initiated?
Both, actually. So a large portion of the dividends from the bank went to companies. So, they're basically kind of just payouts, and they could use the money however they wanted. But the bank, yes, absolutely, was also making huge loans to Opus Dei projects all around the world. And one of the most interesting things for me is that at one stage, Banco Popular in the 1960s bought another bank in Switzerland, and it did a lot of its dealings with Opus Dei vehicles all around the world through this branch in Switzerland. I guess you can draw whatever conclusions from that you want to, but yes, Switzerland is not renowned for its transparency or
yeah. Well, as you're talking about reporting this, I'm getting very cinematic vibes. You're in the archives, you're meeting the old guy, the breakthrough. But, can you talk a bit more about what reporting the story has been like? And, have you encountered a lot of resistance from Opus Dei?
So, okay, it might sound cinematic, but it would make for a very boring film. To basically, me weeks on end in the archives. Most of the time, it's just me kind of sifting through documents. But I've also done a lot of traveling. So I went to visit Argentina to speak with many of these women. And whilst I was there, everywhere I've been to the US as well. Been to Spain many times. I was in Switzerland. Went to Italy. And every time I go to these places, I've always let Opus Dei know that I'm going. And look, I'm interested in meeting officials from Opus Dei within that country and talking to normal members. And I've done that absolutely all the way through. And Opus Dei have been I felt it was almost kind of a bit of a game on their part. I mean, so they like to say that they are transparent, they have nothing to hide. And so whenever you go along and you say you want to speak to someone or you have a question, they kind of engage with you, but only at a certain level. The more you start pushing, the more you start prodding, the more they shut down. So I've had contact with them all the way throughout the project until February, when they decide to kind of basically shut down any communication with me, which was around the same time that I guess some of the marketing material started appearing around the book. And yeah, they just basically shut me down. But I mean, so yes, I mean, I've spoken with a lot of people. I've spoken with more than 150, I think, current and former members of Opus Dei. I've spoken with some of the most senior people in the organization, both from years past and the kind of current leadership, almost all the way to the top. So yeah, I've heard what they've had to say, and yeah, we've had a decent dialogue all the way through. It's all been very cordial and polite. But yeah, there's been, I guess, this, certainly on their part, this kind of undercurrent of suspicion.
If you're thinking about this investigation, why does it matter for us to understand better why an organization like Opus Dei, how they operate, what they're spending money on? Like, how do you bring it home for somebody who's just an everyday person who's trying to understand, why should I care about this?
Because this is an organization that has an enormous amount of influence and power all around the world. It's kind of a hidden force. And it also kind of manipulates its way into people's lives. So because it has the legitimacy of the Vatican kind of, it's authorized by the Vatican. So it kind of convinces ordinary Catholics to welcome the organization into their homes. And once it's in there, it completely abuses that trust to go after the kids, to recruit the kids to become members of Opus Dei, to go after the grown-ups, to get them to hand over their money, and to basically kind of go out there and do what they call apostolate, which is basically kind of, realizing the ambitions of Opus Dei in the political or educational fields or whatever. It's a manipulative organization that abuses the trust that people put in it. And I think for too long, it's been able to hide behind this kind of legitimacy that's been conferred upon it by the Vatican to basically abuse the trust of people. And I think it's about time people had their eyes open to what it actually does. I mean, we haven't mentioned this yet, but I mean, like, there are the official rules of Opus Dei that it publishes on its website, and there's this whole like treasure trove of internal documents that dictate how things really happen. And I was very fortunate that I got a leak during the investigation, and I got a copy of a lot of these internal documents. And so I've been able to kind of piece together how things really work. And I think the book obviously is a warning to the world about this organization. But I also hope that some members of Opus Dei are able to put aside the perhaps kind of initial instincts to seeing the book and actually kind of engage with it. Because I think a lot of Opus Dei members themselves will have their eyes opened to what's really going on within the organization and how they might not think they're being abused and manipulated, but they absolutely are. I mean, I've met with former priests from Opus Dei and former senior members of Opus Dei who've basically told me how, things, very personal things that are given, a kind of, the members express in confession or in spiritual direction classes. All of this information is kind of collected and passed up the chain so that it can be used against the members or, to make them do what the organization wants them to do. It's really dark and manipulative. In my mind, Opus Dei has more in common with organizations like the KGB or the Stasi than it does with other parts of the Catholic Church. It's high time that people woke up to what's really going on and the way that this organization is abusing the trust that people put into it.
Fascinating. Well, thank you very much, Gareth, for joining us.
Thanks, Bradley, for having me.
That's it for this week. Thanks to Gareth for joining us. You can find his book Opus online. It's coming out in October, but you should pre-order it. If you're enjoying the show, please also subscribe to our newsletter. It's at whalehunting.projectbrazen.com. Every week we have at least 2 posts, one of them being our famous Weekender roundup of all the best things to watch and read and listen to.
Whale Hunting is a production of Project Brazen. It's hosted by me, Tom Wright, and Bradley Hope. It's produced by Megan Dean, Claire Urban, and Arnav Binaikia. At Project Brazen, Mariangel Gonzalez is our project manager, and Charlie Barlow is associate producer. Ryan Ho is the creative director, with additional design from Andrea Claridge.